Will you be my daddy? Just for today.
What this CEO did next will leave you in tears. He was the kind of man who never smiled. Not out of rudeness, but because somewhere along the way, his heart had stopped remembering how. Damian Cole, CEO of Cole Tech Industries, walked the narrow hallway of St. Faith's orphanage like he was walking through fog. His designer shoes made no sound on the cold, tiled floor. He wasn't here by choice. The board needed a headline. Billionaire gives back. PR stunt. That's all. Children stared from behind half-closed doors, curious but cautious. Staff greeted him with forced warmth, unsure how close they could stand without being dismissed. Damien didn't notice. He wasn't really here. Not in this moment. His mind, uninvited, kept drifting back to the white hospital corridor, back to the sterile smell of tragedy, back to the last time he had felt something. 5 years ago, he lost his wife and their unborn child. Since then, he had mastered the art of existing without living. He was about to leave when something tugged at his coat. A tiny hand. A pause. Standing there was a girl no taller than his briefcase. 6, maybe 7. Her hair was in puffs, not quite even. Her dress was clean but worn. And her eyes, God, her eyes, held something he hadn't seen in years. Hope, unguarded and raw. "Sir," she said, voice barely louder than a breath. "Could you pretend to be my daddy, just for one day?" Everything around him stilled. Staff froze mid-step. One of the volunteers covered her mouth. Damien didn't blink. She wasn't begging. She wasn't crying. She just asked, like a child asking for water, like it was the most natural thing in the world. He studied her face. No fear, just the boldness of a child with nothing to lose. She didn't know who he was, or maybe she did. Maybe she'd watched him walk through that hallway like a ghost and thought he looked like someone who needed to be reminded what warmth felt like. The room felt too quiet. His throat dry, his chest tight. She was still looking at him, blinking slowly, waiting for an answer. He could have walked away. In fact, he should have. This wasn't part of the plan. He didn't do emotion. He didn't do fatherhood. But something, some fragile thread woven deep inside him, pulled taut. And before his mind could protest, his mouth moved. "Just for one day?" She nodded. And then, with the gentlest of smiles, she reached out and took his hand, like she'd been waiting for it her entire life. He didn't understand why he said yes. Maybe it was the way she looked at him, not with fear or expectation, but with the quiet certainty of a child who'd learned not to ask twice. Or maybe it was the silence that followed her question, thick enough to choke on. Whatever it was, when Damian Cole nodded and told his assistant to cancel the rest of the day, it felt like something irreversible had begun. Zara didn't cheer or bounce with excitement. Instead, she gently took his hand, small fingers curling around as like it was the most normal thing in the world, and led him down a different hallway, one not meant for corporate tours. She brought him to a little room painted in faded yellow. A rickety table sat in the center, plastic cups and mismatched saucers arranged carefully. Paper crowns, folded with precision, waited on a nearby shelf. Zara placed one on his head, grinning shyly. "You're the king. I'm the princess." He almost laughed at the absurdity, but held it in. His hands, usually clutching reports and billion-dollar contracts, now hovered over invisible teacups. She poured imaginary tea with great seriousness, offering him a cup like it held liquid gold. He mimicked sipping. "Delicious," he muttered. Zara beamed. She chattered softly as they played, telling him about her teddy bear who once got sick, how the garden behind the orphanage only grew the sad kind of flowers, and how Sister Mercy said God could hear you better if you spoke near the mango tree. Damien didn't speak much, just nodded, watching her with the curiosity of a man witnessing life through unfamiliar glass. They moved to the reading corner. Worn books, their covers frayed with love and time, lay in a pile. Zara picked one with missing pages, but insisted it was her favorite. She curled into his side, her head resting against his arm, waiting. He read. His voice was stiff at first, formal, unsure. But as the story unfolded, something inside him loosened. He changed voices for the characters. She laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a real, full laugh. It startled him. And then it happened. He laughed too. It slipped out before he could catch it. A sound so unfamiliar that it echoed in his own ears like it belonged to someone else. Zara looked up at him, delighted. You smiled. He coughed, adjusting his tie. Why me? He asked, more to himself than to her. Why'd you ask me? Zara didn't answer immediately. She played with a thread coming loose on her sleeve, eyes focused, thoughtful. Then she looked up, and in the softest voice, she said, because you look like someone who forgot how to smile. That stopped him. No corporate strategist, no therapist, no well-meaning colleague had ever said something that true to his face. A 6-year-old had spotted what the world missed, or maybe what he had worked so hard to hide. The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was warm, peaceful, like resting on a couch you'd almost forgotten you owned. They ended the afternoon in the garden. She pointed out the sad flowers. He promised to bring seeds for happier ones. Before he left, she hugged him, not tightly, not dramatically, just gently, as if they both knew the pretend day was ending. But something real had just begun. The sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows across the courtyard. Laughter from the younger children echoed faintly, but the orphanage was beginning to settle for the night. Damien stood by a window in the main hall, watching Zara skip around the garden one last time before dinner. Something about her lingered with him, like a melody stuck in the corners of his mind. Mr. Cole, came a soft voice behind him. He turned to see Sister Mercy, her eyes kind, her hands folded. Would you step into my office for a moment? Inside, the room was small but warm, filled with books, old photographs, and a wooden crucifix above her desk. She offered him a seat and placed a slim folder in front of him. It bore one name, Zara Adeyemi. I thought you should know, she said gently. He hesitated before opening it. Her file was thin, like a story unfinished. Born in the orphanage, mother deceased at childbirth. No name listed for the father. No family ever came. Sister Mercy explained how Zara had been here all her life. Quiet, observant. Never troublesome, never loud. She played alone, smiled politely, but never clung, never reached. Until today. She's never asked anyone to be her daddy before, Sister Mercy said, voice catching slightly. Not once. Not in 6 years. Damien swallowed hard. He hadn't expected this to shake him, but it did. Maybe because he wasn't ready to admit what Zara's simple request had stirred inside him. She's different with you. More open. More hopeful. He didn't reply. Instead, he stared at the form in his hands, the ink starting to blur in places. His fingers traced the edge of the page as a memory surged, unwanted but unrelenting. A white hospital hallway. A nurse, eyes full of pity. I'm sorry, Mr. Cole. We couldn't save either of them. His world had fractured in that moment. A future with lullabies, birthday candles, bedtime stories, all gone. He had walked out of the hospital that night and into a life that felt numb. Work had become his sanctuary, silence his companion. He built towers of glass and steel to distract from the ache. But none of it had healed the hollow inside him. And now, this little girl, this stranger, was unearthing memories he had buried so deep, even his reflection no longer recognized them. She's strong, Sister Mercy continued. But strength like hers, it usually comes from knowing loss too early. Damien stood, not trusting his voice. He walked back to the window. Zara was gone now, likely inside with the others. But her presence still filled the space somehow, like a flicker of warmth in a house long cold. He turned to the nun. What does she need? Sister Mercy smiled. Someone who stays. That answer hung in the room like truth. He nodded once slowly. Outside, night had settled. The lights in the orphanage glowed softly, and somewhere down the hallway, a small voice could be heard singing to her stuffed bear. Damien listened, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. Saturday mornings began to carry a rhythm Damien never anticipated. Where once his weekends were buried in reports and boardrooms, now they led him to the gate of St. Faith's, where a small figure always waited, bright-eyed, shoes slightly scuffed, arms already reaching. Zara. He didn't understand it at first. The pull, the quiet excitement he felt stepping out of the car, watching her jump from the bench and dashed toward him like the world had finally come back to life. She never asked where he'd been, never complained when his visits were shorter than promised. She just smiled, like his presence alone was enough. The gift started small: a set of storybooks, a box of crayons, then new shoes. Nothing flashy, just comfortable, durable. But it wasn't what he brought that mattered. It was that he came. Over and over. Zara's world, once shaded in stillness, began to bloom. They planted a flower behind the garden shed one warm afternoon. "This one's ours," she whispered, poking the soil with her fingers. "It'll grow because it knows we care." He laughed, soft and unguarded. She didn't know she'd just described their bond. He taught her how to tie a tie on her bear, named Officer Fluffy. She practiced it over and over, determined to get it right. "So he looks like you," she said. He didn't argue. One weekend, he stayed for the orphanage's charity fair. Amid the crowd, Zara clung to his hand, excited but overwhelmed. When the music began and the children danced, she pulled him toward the stage, hesitant. To calm her nerves, he lifted her onto his shoulders. The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. And just like that, the man once dubbed the ICO was caught on film smiling, genuinely, completely. The photo hit tabloids within hours. The untouchable titan has a soft side. It was the girl melting Damien Cole's heart. He didn't care. For once, headlines meant nothing. What mattered was the way Zara laughed when she saw their photo in the paper. "They caught your good side," she teased. Back in his penthouse, a sterile place with cold furniture and darker shadows, something shifted. He stood in his office, staring at the white wall beside his desk. And then, from his coat pocket, he pulled out a folded paper, one of Zara's drawings. Two stick figures under a bright sun, one tall, one small, both smiling. Without a second thought, he pinned it to the wall. It wasn't art. It wasn't corporate, but it belonged there. A new ritual formed. After every visit, he brought home something: another drawing, a flower pressed in a book, a trinket she found and insisted he keep. His apartment began to soften, the silence less hostile. Sister Mercy noticed the change too. "You become someone's safe place," she told him. He didn't respond, just nodded slowly, unsure what that meant, or how deeply it had already altered him. Week by week, without fanfare, Zara was rebuilding him. Not with grand gestures, but with tiny, irreplaceable moments. A giggle during a story. A proud smile when she finished a sentence he'd helped her sound out. The way she'd lean on his arm like it was the most natural thing in the world. He hadn't planned for this. He never imagined a connection this fragile could feel so permanent. But as she slipped her hand into his again the following Saturday, and he looked down at her like she was the only thing that made sense, he knew. Brick by brick, they were becoming something real. The headlines had barely cooled when the backlash began. In the boardroom of cold tech, concern brewed beneath polite tones. Charts and quarterly projections gave way to hushed murmurs and sharp glances. Investors called it a potential liability. PR teams spun it as a personal distraction. Behind polished glass walls, voices turned pointed. "You're getting emotionally entangled, Damien." They didn't care about the truth, about the way Zara's presence had started to stitch something torn inside him. To them, she was a risk, a deviation, a threat to the image they had so carefully crafted. Damien sat through the meetings, stiff and silent, but the weight pressed heavier than he expected. Somewhere along the line, he had let light in, and now they were demanding he shut the door. He didn't argue. He nodded, gave nothing away, then walked out and made the hardest decision of his life. That afternoon, he returned to St. Faith's with a heart caught between reason and ruin. Zara was in her usual spot near the mango tree, braiding a doll's hair with unmatched focus. She lit up when she saw him, running over with the ease of someone who had begun to trust the idea of always. But today wasn't the same. He knelt, lowering himself to her level. His voice lacked its usual warmth. "I won't be coming back for a while." Zara blinked. "Why?" He hesitated. "Things are complicated." She didn't cry, didn't beg, just nodded slowly, like she already understood the pattern of people leaving. Like this moment, though painful, wasn't unfamiliar. From the pocket of her tiny cardigan, She pulled out a folded paper. "I was saving this," she whispered. Damien took it carefully. It was a drawing, crude but full of meaning. Two stick figures, standing hand in hand beneath a beaming sun. One tall, one small, both smiling. Above them, in bold red crayon, the words, "My one-day daddy." His throat tightened. She didn't say anything else, just turned and walked back to her doll, resuming the braid without looking up again. He left quietly. The drive home blurred. Cars passed. Horns blared. None of it registered. The drawing lay on the passenger's seat, vibrating with the hum of the engine. At a red light, it all hit at once. The stillness of the hospital room years ago. The silence when they told him she was gone. The ache that had never dulled. And now, Zara's soft voice, her small hand, the way she looked at him like he mattered. His chest constricted. Breathing became a chore. The car swerved slightly as emotion seized him. He pulled over, hands trembling, vision blurred. Parked on an empty street with nothing but the hum of passing lives, Damien Cole wept. Not the silent tears of a control man, but the guttural sobs of someone breaking open. He cried for the wife he buried, for the child he never got to hold, for the girl who only asked for one thing, to stay. The drawing crumpled in his grip, but he didn't let go, because in that fragile sketch was everything he'd run from, and everything he wasn't ready to lose again. The gates of St. Faith's creaked open with a familiar heaviness, but this time, Damien walked through them without a schedule or security detail. He wasn't dressed for a photo op. No cameras trailed him. The storm in his chest left little room for performance. Sister Mercy stood at the steps, her face unreadable. She had seen men change over time, broken fathers, hardened donors, curious volunteers, but none like him. None who returned like this. "I need to see her," Damien said, voice gravel-thick. "She's in the garden." The walk there felt longer than he remembered. With every step, his heartbeat grew louder, echoing in his chest like footsteps down a hall of regret. Zara was crouched by their flower patch, carefully pulling weeds, unaware of the man standing behind her. He knelt, gravel biting into his knees, and reached out with a trembling hand. "Zara." She turned slowly. No surprise, no excitement, just quiet, watchful eyes waiting for explanation. Tears welled in his own. "I thought I was doing you a favor, but you're the one who saved me." She didn't move, didn't speak. He opened his arms. Only then did she run to him. The decision wasn't made in a single breath, but in 1,000 small ones that followed. Damien didn't just want to visit anymore. He wanted to become her father. The process began. Applications, interviews, background checks, psych evaluations. Social workers raised eyebrows. They saw a billionaire chasing redemption, unsure if it would last beyond the paperwork. One even asked, "What makes you think money can fix what she needs?" Damien didn't answer with numbers. He showed up. Every meeting, every mandatory class, every counseling session. He sat in cold chairs beside Zara, learned the rhythms of her laughter, the triggers of her silence. He let her lead, never forcing her to call him anything she didn't choose. And slowly, the system began to believe what she already knew. He wasn't pretending anymore. Back at his penthouse, the transformation mirrored his own. One room was gutted, walls repainted in soft sky blue. A ceiling mural shimmered with hand-painted stars. She picked every detail. Unicorn bedding, glow-in-the-dark planets, a lamp shaped like the moon. She called it Heaven's Room, because it was the first place she'd ever imagined beyond survival. The media circled like vultures. Rumors spun. CEO adopts orphan for publicity? Heartwarming or headline strategy? Damien ignored them all. He wasn't performing. He was rebuilding. The day the papers arrived, a lawyer sat across from him with a clipboard. Just a signature. His hand trembled. This time, it wasn't from fear, but from the weight of what this meant. He looked at Zara, now seated beside him in her Sunday dress, her feet swinging from the chair. She held his pinky with fierce certainty. He signed, then looked at her. "Welcome home, Zara." She grinned wide, teeth crooked, eyes full. "Does this mean you're mine for real?" Damien nodded, voice caught in his throat. "No more pretending," he whispered. She launched into his arms, nearly knocking him backward. In that moment, no courtroom, no contract, no headline could capture the truth. He hadn't just adopted a daughter. He'd found his way back to life. The school auditorium buzzed with anticipation. Rows of parents, siblings, and teachers filled the hall, fanning themselves with printed programs. Laughter, whispers, and the occasional squeaky shoe echoed under the warm overhead lights. At the back of the stage, behind a velvet curtain, Zara adjusted her paper crown, her small fingers trembling slightly. Tonight was her big moment. She was cast as the daughter of a king in the school's annual play about family. Weeks of rehearsals had led to this, learning her lines, practicing her curtsy, making sure her paper scepter didn't fall apart mid-performance. But none of that mattered if he wasn't here. Peeking through the gap in the curtain, her heart thudded. Row after row of faces scanned the stage, chatting, waiting. She searched for his face, the one she trusted, the one who always kept his word now. But his seat was empty. Her chest tightened. A flicker of old fear rose. Maybe this was another almost. Maybe real didn't last. The lights dimmed. The crowd hushed. The play began. She stepped onto the stage with practiced grace, delivering her lines clearly, voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. The story unfolded, one about a lonely king who found a daughter in the unlikeliest of places. It echoed her truth in ways she couldn't name aloud. Halfway through, she turned to deliver her line to the imaginary king. And that's when she saw him. Back row, standing, a little out of breath, as if he'd just rushed in. Damien Cole, no longer the polished executive, but the man who had become her anchor. His hands clapped proudly, eyes locked on hers, a smile that said you did it. Zara's shoulders eased. Her voice rang stronger. The play ended in thunderous applause. The final curtain fell. Children bowed and ran off stage into waiting arms. Zara didn't wait to be dismissed. She dashed into the audience, weaving through legs and programs and parents, straight into his arms. He caught her with the ease of someone who had been waiting a lifetime to do just that. "You came," she breathed. "I told you I would." She looked up at him, eyes wide and certain. "You're not pretending anymore, are you, Daddy?" His arms tightened around her. He bent down, forehead resting gently against hers. "No, my star, not anymore." In that moment, it didn't matter that they didn't share blood. What mattered was presence. What mattered was choice. And he had chosen her. The lights dimmed again as the auditorium cleared. Paper crowns lay scattered on empty chairs. The night quieted, but something eternal lingered in the air. A bond not born in a courtroom, but in tea parties, bedtime stories, and a single, trembling question whispered by a girl with nothing to lose. On screen, a line faded into view. Sometimes it only takes one day to find forever. And somewhere in that forever, a little girl and her not-so-pretend daddy walked hand in hand. Home. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes in second chances. And if you've ever been saved by love when you least expected it, tell us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more powerful stories that remind us one moment can change everything.